The door wasn't supposed to open. That was the first thought that crossed my mind as it slid aside with a soft, almost polite hiss, like it had been expecting me specifically and had decided to stop pretending otherwise. I stood there for a moment, staring at the gap as if it might apologize and close again. It didn't. Doors, I've learned, rarely apologize. I wasn't even trying that hard, I muttered, glancing back at the empty corridor behind me. The research outpost was quiet in that unsettling way that suggested either everyone was asleep or something had already gone terribly wrong. I preferred the first option. It allowed for optimism. Inside, the room pulsed faintly with a low hum, the kind that vibrates in your teeth if you stand still long enough. Lights traced the edges of the walls in slow, thoughtful patterns, as if the room was thinking about something complicated and refusing to share its conclusions. I stepped in anyway because curiosity has always been stronger than my survival instincts, which is probably how I ended up in situations like this in the first place. "This is definitely where I die," I said, mostly to the room. The room, for its part, chose not to comment. The space wasn't filled with weapons or experimental creatures or anything immediately dramatic. Instead, it was lined with thin, floating panels arranged in perfect symmetry, each one glowing faintly with symbols I didn't recognize. They shifted when I moved closer, reacting to my presence like they had been waiting for someone to finally show up and read them. I hesitated. "I feel like I should have clearance for this," I said, then I shrugged. "I also feel like I should have had clearance for the last 5 things I touched today, and here we are." I reached out and tapped the nearest panel. It unfolded instantly, expanding into a wider surface filled with text, not alien symbols, not complex equations, text, my language, my words. I blinked. "Okay," I said slowly. "That's convenient, suspiciously convenient." The first line read like a report. Subject displays consistent hesitation before verbal responses. Average delay 2-3 seconds, not due to lack of comprehension but internal overanalysis. I stared at it for a long moment. "Wow," I said, "rude." I looked around, half expecting someone to jump out and laugh, to admit this was some elaborate joke. No one did. The room continued its quiet humming, entirely uninterested in my discomfort. I looked back at the panel. Subject misplaced personal identification device 3 times within a single rotation cycle. Exhibits mild frustration followed by self-directed sarcasm. I instinctively checked my pocket. The device was there, for once. "That was 1 time," I said defensively, then I paused. "Okay, maybe 3, but still." I scrolled down, my finger hovering just above the surface as if touching it too much might somehow make this more real. Subject attempted to sit on unstable seating structure in public area. Resulted in structural failure. Subject expressed embarrassment and attempted to reframe incident as a test of engineering integrity. I closed my eyes briefly. "That chair had it coming," I said. "It knew what it was doing." The panel did not argue. It didn't need to. A slow, uncomfortable realization began to settle in. These weren't guesses. They weren't general observations that could apply to anyone. They were specific, painfully specific. "Okay," I said, straightening slightly. "So someone's been watching me. That's fine. Normal. People love watching me fail at basic tasks." I glanced at the other panels. There were dozens, maybe hundreds. "Nope," I said immediately. "Absolutely not. I'm not that interesting." And yet I reached for another one. It opened with the same quiet precision. Subject exhibits tendency to speak aloud when alone. Possible coping mechanism. Alternatively, enjoys own commentary. I looked around again. "I do not enjoy my own commentary," I said, then I paused. "Okay, sometimes I do, that's not the point." I skimmed further, my unease growing with each line. Subject demonstrates avoidance of direct confrontation. Prefers humor as deflection. Ineffective in high-stakes scenarios but moderately successful in social contexts. Moderately successful, I repeated. "I'll have you know I am extremely successful in at least 3 conversations I can remember." I stopped. The words on the panel shifted slightly, rearranging themselves as if adjusting to something I couldn't see. Then I noticed the timestamp. It wasn't from earlier today. It wasn't from yesterday. It was from years ago. I frowned. "That's not right," I said quietly. I opened another panel and another. Each one contained entries, observations, records all about me, all stretching back further than they should. Some of them described moments I remembered with uncomfortable clarity, small, insignificant things I'd never told anyone. Others didn't. I froze on one entry. Subject observed in environment not recorded in official logs. Interaction with unknown individual, memory retention inconsistent. I read it again. I stopped. That didn't happen, but the certainty in my voice wasn't convincing, even to me. I leaned closer as if the panel might clarify itself if I looked at it hard enough. "There's no way you're making this up," I said. "That would be weird. Why would you make that up?" the panel once again chose silence. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. "This is fine," I said. "This is completely fine. Someone has been secretly documenting my entire life, including things I don't remember. That's a manageable problem." I turned in a slow circle, taking in the room again. The panels hovered around me like patient witnesses, each one holding pieces of something I didn't yet understand. "All right," I said, squaring my shoulders. "Whoever you are, this is officially too much effort for a prank. You could have just left a note, a normal note like a normal person, or whatever you are." No response. "Great," I sighed. "Mysterious, silent observer, my favorite kind." I hesitated, then reached for another panel. This one opened more slowly, as if considering whether I was ready for what it contained. The text appeared line by line. "Initial observation, subject considered statistically insignificant." I raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me, further observation required due to anomaly." I leaned in slightly. "Anomaly," I echoed. The next line took longer to appear. "Subject's continued existence intersects with projected outcomes at increasing frequency." I blinked. "Okay," I said. "Now we're getting into nonsense territory." But I didn't stop reading. "Probability models adjusted accordingly." I frowned. "I don't like the sound of that." The final line appeared, slower than the others, as if it carried more weight. "Further monitoring deemed necessary." I stared at it for a long moment, then I let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Necessary," I repeated. "Right. Because clearly, whatever's happening in the universe hinges on whether I remember where I put my keys." The room hummed softly, offering no argument. I looked around again, but this time it felt different. The silence wasn't empty. It was watchful. "Okay," I said quietly. "New question." I glanced back at the panel. "Who exactly decided I was worth all this?" The room did not answer, which felt consistent with its overall personality. I gave it a few seconds anyway, just in case it was the dramatic type. "All right," I said, clapping my hands once. "Silence, very powerful, very mysterious. I'm impressed." I turned back to the panels, which hovered with the quiet patience of something that had already outlived several bad decisions. Mine included, apparently. "Let's establish something," I continued, pointing at the nearest one. "If you're going to analyze me, you could at least include a section where I look cool, just occasionally, for balance." The panel didn't update. Rude. I moved deeper into the room, and the panels shifted subtly to make space, like a crowd that didn't want to be touched but also didn't want to seem impolite. More entries flickered open as I passed, each one offering another piece of a version of me that felt uncomfortably complete. "Subject exhibits increasing curiosity despite elevated anxiety levels." "I am not anxious," I said. "This is my relaxed face." I paused. "Okay, maybe a little anxious." Another panel lit up before I even reached for it. "Subject aware of surveillance, chooses humor as a stabilizing response." I stared at it. "Oh, now you're just showing off," I muttered. "What's next? You finish my sentences?" The air shifted, not dramatically, not with alarms or flashing lights, just a subtle change, like the room had taken a breath it hadn't needed before. I froze. "If something's about to happen," I said slowly, "I'd really appreciate a warning. I'm not great with surprises, or expected events, honestly, but especially surprises." The panels dimmed slightly, their glow lowering as if deferring to something else. A sound followed, soft, measured, footsteps. I turned toward the entrance, heart doing that thing where it forgets its rhythm and improvises instead. "Okay," I said under my breath, "this is it. This is where the mysterious observer steps in and either explains everything or vaporizes me. 50-50. The figure that entered did neither. She walked in without urgency, without hesitation, like she had been here 1,000 times and had grown bored of making an entrance. The lights adjusted around her, not brighter, but attentive. As if they were aware of her in a way they hadn't been aware of me. I straightened instinctively, then immediately regretted it because I had no idea what posture was appropriate for whatever this was. "Hi," I said. She didn't respond right away. Her gaze moved across the room, briefly touching the panels, then settling on me with a focus that felt less like attention and more like precision. Up close, the details became impossible to ignore. She looked human, too human, almost but not quite. There was a subtle symmetry to her features that felt engineered rather than natural, and then there were the ears. Long, elegant, extending just enough to disrupt the illusion without making it grotesque. I stared at them. "I'm sorry," I said immediately. "I don't mean to stare, it's just those are very noticeable." Silence. I shifted slightly. "Do they help with hearing?" I added because apparently my brain had decided this was the correct direction to take. She blinked once. "I can hear you without them," she said. Her voice was calm, not cold, not warm, just certain. "Right," I nodded. "Good. That would have been awkward if you couldn't." I gestured vaguely toward my own ears. "These are mostly decorative, if I'm being honest, not great at their job." She watched me for a moment longer, as if evaluating whether I was malfunctioning or simply like this by default. Your commentary is consistent with recorded behavior, she said. I froze. You wrote those, I said. It wasn't really a question, it didn't need to be. Yes, no hesitation, no denial. Just a simple acknowledgement that somehow made everything more real. Okay, I exhaled. Great, good, fantastic. So just to clarify, you've been watching me. Yes, for how long? She tilted her head slightly as if considering how much of the answer I could handle, long enough to establish patterns. That is not a time measurement, I said. It is sufficient. I rubbed my face. Right, of course it is. I took a step closer, then stopped, suddenly aware that approaching her might be a terrible idea. She didn't react, which somehow made it worse. Why? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze shifted briefly to the panels, then back to me like she was aligning two sets of information. You were not significant at the beginning, she said. Wow, I replied, starting strong. You became inconsistent. I blinked. I'm sorry, what does that mean? Inconsistent how? I'm consistently confused, if that helps. It means your actions diverged from projected models, she said. Repeatedly, I let that sit for a second. Okay, I said slowly. And instead of ignoring that like a reasonable person, you decided to document everything I've ever done. Yes, I stared at her. You're very committed, I said. I am precise. Sure, that too. I glanced back at the panels. Some of those entries, I said, my voice tightening slightly, they describe things I don't remember. She didn't look surprised. Your memory is incomplete. That's not reassuring, I said, at all. It is accurate. I paced a small circle because standing still suddenly felt impossible. Okay, let's say I believe you, I said. Let's say there are gaps. Why are you filling them? Why me? She watched me, her expression unchanged, but there was something else now. Not emotion exactly, something quieter. Because you are recurring, she said. I stopped. Recurring, I repeated. In multiple projections, she continued. Your presence alters outcomes. I let out a short laugh. No, I said, no, that's not how that works. I alter outcomes by deciding what to eat for dinner. That's the extent of my influence. That is incorrect. Good, I said. Glad we cleared that up. I ran a hand through my hair again. So what, I'm some kind of cosmic problem? I asked. An equation you can't solve? She considered that. Yes, I stared at her. You could have said that more gently. I prefer accuracy. Of course you do. There was a pause, and for the first time it didn't feel empty. It felt shared. I glanced at her again, at the way she stood so still it was almost deliberate, like movement was something she chose carefully rather than something that just happened. And the notes, I said, they change the tone. I mean, at first it's all analysis, then it gets, I hesitated, different. She didn't respond immediately. It evolved, she said finally. That's a very neutral way of putting it, I said. It is an accurate way. I stepped closer again, this time not stopping. And what is it now? I asked. Her gaze met mine, steady and unflinching, unresolved. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Yeah, I said quietly, that makes two of us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room hummed around us, the panels waiting, the air thick with something that was quite tension and wasn't quite understanding. Then I gestured vaguely at everything. So, I said, what happens now? Do you keep watching me, write more notes, publish a very detailed biography where I come off slightly worse than I'd like? She studied me, and this time there was a flicker of something unmistakable. No, she said. I blinked. No, I frowned. Then what? She stepped forward, not much, just enough to close the distance in a way that felt intentional. Now she was close enough that I could see the faint, almost imperceptible shifts in her expression, the way her composure wasn't as absolute as it pretended to be. Now, she said, you become involved. I stared at her. I was hoping you wouldn't say that, I admitted. I folded my arms, mostly to keep them from doing something unhelpful like pointing at the nearest exit and suggesting we both pretend none of this had happened. Involved how? I asked, because historically when someone tells me that, it ends with paperwork or explosions. I'm bad at both. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, one of the panels behind her shifted, expanding into a wider field of light. The symbols rearranged themselves again, but this time they didn't become words. They became scenes, fragments of motion, like windows into places I didn't recognize. Cities, not like ours. Structures that curved into the sky in impossible geometries, their surfaces shimmering as if they were undecided about being solid. Ships, if they were ships, hung above them, silent and immense. Then the images changed. The same cities but darker, fractured, empty. I leaned slightly to the side. Okay, I said, I'm going to guess that the second version is the one we're trying to avoid. Yes, great, love a clear objective. I stepped closer to the panel, squinting at the shifting images. And I'm in this how? Please don't say I accidentally trip over something important. You do not, she said. I relaxed a fraction. Oh good, you make a decision. I sighed. Of course I do. The images shifted again. This time I saw something else, not cities, not ships, me. I leaned back immediately. Nope, I said. I don't like that. I don't like seeing myself from angles I didn't approve. The version of me in the projection stood in a place I didn't recognize, speaking to someone just out of view. My posture was different, not dramatically, but enough that I noticed. Less hesitant. "That's not how I stand," I muttered. "It is how you will stand," she said. I glanced at her. "You sound very confident about that." "I have observed it." "Right, but you've also observed a lot of things that haven't happened yet, so forgive me if I'm not immediately impressed." The projection shifted again, another version, another outcome. In one the cities remained intact, in another they didn't, in some I wasn't even there. "That's new," I said, pointing. "I like that one, very low pressure." "I simply don't exist in the situation." "Perfect. You are present in the majority of viable outcomes," she said. "Of course I am, can't catch a break even in hypothetical scenarios." I turned away from the panel, rubbing the back of my neck. "So let me get this straight," I said. "You've been watching me because I keep showing up in your future like an uninvited guest." "Yes." "And instead of ignoring me, you decided to study me." "Yes, and now you want me to what? Make the right decision?" She stepped closer again, her gaze steady. "I want you to understand the decision." I let out a small laugh. "That's worse," I said. "If I don't understand it, I can blame ignorance. If I do understand it, then it's on me." "That is correct. Fantastic. Love that for me." I paced again, slower this time. "Okay," I said. "What's the decision?" She didn't answer right away. The panels dimmed slightly, as if the room itself was leaning in. "When the moment occurs," she said, "you will be given a choice that affects the stability of multiple systems." "Multiple systems," I repeated. "That sounds like more responsibility than I signed up for." "You did not sign up, clearly." I stopped pacing. "And you can't just tell me what to do?" "No, because in every projection where I intervene directly, the outcome destabilizes further." I stared at her. "So your grand strategy is to watch me struggle and hope I figure it out." "It is the most effective approach." I let out a long breath. "That's deeply unhelpful," I said, then I paused, also kind of flattering in a terrifying way. She didn't respond, but there was that flicker again, subtle, brief. I glanced back at the panels, at the countless versions of things that hadn't happened yet. "And the notes?" I asked. "All of this, was it just preparation?" "Yes," I nodded slowly. "Right, of course it was." I hesitated, then looked at her again. "Some of them changed," I said. "The tone, you said it evolved." "It did. Why?" She held my gaze, and for a moment the precision in her expression